but in the pursuit of our own sustainability in the Anthropocene on planet Earth, with recognition of how vital the rest of the life support continuum is in this world, whether you're a solipsist, capitalist, or a deep ecologist, what we do and how we think are important indeed. As Disney Imagineer Joe Tankersley points out in Reimagining Our Futures, making sure the future doesn't suck, the stories we tell of the human condition and our paradoxical relationships to other life forms, and the tropes we use to tell those stories, whether we see our presence here as a comedy, a tragedy, a romance, or a satire, to use the categories created by Hayden White, controversial author of the 1973 classic Meta-History, which marked a revolutionary turning point in historical theory, and the fiction of narrative and the historical imagination, have profound effects on the outcomes. Tropes are both biases and flavors, and they have a big downstream influence that can constrain or even corrupt our creative capabilities, herding us, if you like, into foregone conclusions, leading to a groupthink problem associated with mob mentalities. For example, the romance trope tends to work through metaphorical thinking and tends to map onto an anarchist mentality that uses the representational mode of thinking. The tragedy trope tends to work through metonymy, maps onto radical mentalities, and uses mostly reductionist logic as its mode of thinking. Meanwhile, the comedic trope tends to work through synecdoche and ironically seems to be the one favored by traditional conservatives, not Trump-era pseudocons, because its mode of thinking tends to be integrative, while it is the satirical trope that tends to work through the true irony and influences most so-called liberals with a negational mode of thinking. The romantic tends to use formist arguments. Tragedy tends to use mechanistic arguments. Comedy tends to come from organicist arguments, and satire from contextualist arguments. Get a bead on the kind of argumentation you use, and you might get a handle on how your audience is going to perceive and receive you. Now, none of this is written in stone, of course, and Hayden White's simplistic categorization and mappings aren't always accurate. They are tendencies. But as we observed in the film adaptation of the Houston, We Have a Problem adventure of Apollo 13, a mere 1 degree offset of tendency away from your trajectory when you're facing the Earth from the moon can make you miss your home planet completely after a journey of thousands of miles. So be careful. The tropes drive you in certain directions, and if everybody in a group uses the same tropes, the entire herd of well-intentioned would-be sustainability visionaries can drive itself off a cliff at worst or miss its mark at best. For a truly justice-oriented, equitable, and sustainable future, we don't want to have one trope dominate. E.O. Wilson's In Praise of Diversity speeches and writings show that over evolutionary time, the ESS, or evolutionarily stable strategy, is to maximize diversity, not bland conformity. It is for this reason that nature evolved variety maximizing sexual reproduction, but still retained cloning and vegetative propagation in its portfolio. If we are to evolve toward a true United Nations and on to a possible one world government, we need to be very, very careful not to succumb to groupthink, no matter how utopian. That way lies tyranny. For after all, we haven't really changed much since the Pleistocene. Only our technology has changed, serving the same base instincts in more powerful, out louder ways, for better or for worse. And now that we can command the attention of ever larger numbers of people with compelling memes, we could blunder ever more easily into a collective intelligence that forces dystopian results, since, as Lord Acton famously quipped, power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. A trope is a tendency. Use it well. Speaking of well, H.G. Wells predicted a world brain in his premonitions of the future. He had written his famous novel, The Time Machine, and spent a lot of time thinking about possible futures. His great concern was that our education systems weren't preparing humanity to use that world brain well, as we were far too preoccupied with our immediate political futures, rather than seeing the system as a whole. His worries about humanity mirror those I've had since my time studying primatology, when I found myself at the Paris Zoo, watching baboons fight to be king of the hill in a poorly designed exhibit that could only by virtue of having only one high point in the enclosure, elicit the worst of private behavior. The baboons, I recall, were so concerned with their own politics of dominance and submission that they seemed absolutely oblivious to all the people watching them and to all the other animals clearly in view in other exhibits. To these poor monkeys, the denizens of their particular monkey house were all they could think about. That myopia defeats the great possibilities of the world brain and collective intelligence larger in scope than our own. Today we actually have created, in so many ways, the world brain that H.G. Wells predicted via the magic of the light-speed fiber optic internet and telecommunications satellites in outer space. Drones, even nanobot micro-drones like those featured in Michael Crichton's 2002 sci-fi novel Prey or in the series Black Mirror, are coming off the drawing board and into the air, connected as one interconnected hive mind via instantly updatable genetic algorithms. The intelligence of machines still unwired into this growing consciousness is also evolving rapidly, and unlike all other brains or collective intelligences before it, this time it is coming to cognition already equipped with both internet, onboard, and external cloud storage systems to record and remember and learn from its experiences and analyze and make predictive models of the consequences of future moves. The age of beings that merely think is over. And once the AI integrates with NI, natural intelligence, as is already beginning to happen, thinking out loud and out louder will be an inherent property of life itself, with the ability to shape worlds in intentional directions. It's our job to make sure the intention is toward a viable sustainability that is both enduring and equitable and just and joyful.